Now, we've all heard stories that 2012 is the end of the world as we know it, and some claim this is because the Mayan calendar, which covers 5,125 years all up, simply ends in the next year. But according to Carl-Johan Calleman, who's the Swedish-born author who has spent years researching and writing several books about the calendar, the Mayan calendar actually ends this week. Yep, this Friday, the 28th of October. So what does this mean and what lies ahead for you, me and the world as we know it? My next guest, Steve Beckow, career as cultural historian for the National Museum of Man, which is now known as the Canadian Museum of Civilization. He finished his working life as a member of the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, and he's also a member of Mensa Canada. 1977, he had an out-of-body experience which demonstrated to him that the sole purpose of life was enlightenment. And since then, he's written over 20 books and 250 articles, actively pursuing anything and everything to do with our current and future world. Steve now manages and edits a comprehensive website that looks at Scenario 2012 and what is referred to as our newer golden age. Steve Beckow kindly joins me now from his home in Vancouver, Canada. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. It's good to be here.
Excellent to have you here too, I might say. Now tell me, what significance do you believe this Friday, being the 28th of October, holds for all of us, if indeed Carl Calleman is right and the Mayan calendar does effectively end this week?
Well, the Mayan calendar, this cycle ends. It's not that the Mayan calendar ends, but it's more that the cycle described in the Mayan calendar as it stands ends. But that doesn't determine the events that we'll be encountering in the, say, year and a half ahead, which is going to be quite an amazing year for all of us. There is no gloom and doom in our future, save the gloom and doom that's accompanying the collapse of certain structures in the world that I'm sure your listeners are watching. They're watching the Occupy Together movement and Arab Spring and what have you. So you're seeing certain structures collapse. That's true, but they're to be replaced by structures that are ever so much better for everyone concerned.
We can just take a step back then. You said the current cycle of the Mayan calendar, and we will get to all those things in a minute, but the calendar, as I understand it, is in several cycles, or there's apparently 9 waves. Is that correct?
9 underworlds, yes.
Yep. And the last one is it's supposed to have started in March this year, around March 9th, and then that's why it finishes on October the 29th. And each cycle gets shorter and shorter. Why this year's has been so short?
That's correct. Each cycle is shorter by, I'm not a mathematician, so I hope I phrased this right, by a factor of 20. So if something were 20, the last cycle was 20 days, then the next cycle would be 1 day. But of course, the cycles in the beginning were very, very long. If I can't represent myself as an expert on the Mayan calendar, but if I recall correctly, in the beginning of the Mayan calendar, the cycles were at least millions, perhaps billions of years long.
Right, and this year's gone so quickly.
Absolutely. Well, as I say, if you divide each underworld cycle by 20, a factor of 20, you see the cycles getting shorter and shorter.
Now, as you just alluded to, we're even sitting here today, this afternoon, and right around the world, especially in Europe, the world economy seems to be crashing down. You said it's not all gloom and doom, so tell me a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, let me say that there is so much to say, Stephen, about this that I sincerely doubt that in 10 minutes we could even touch upon on all that's going to be happening.
All right. Well, tell me about I know that there are other significant dates that should or shouldn't necessarily be held to, but can you tell me a little the significant dates in the year ahead?
Sure. Well, actually, if we approach it from the angle of dates, that would be a little bit difficult because the the events that I'm alluding to will occur when the conditions are right. I understand that they'll occur, some of them will occur before the end of this year. Why don't I talk about it in terms of events rather than dates?
Yep, okay, all right.
Okay, so,
yep,
well, the first, the kind of the event that we're watching right now that is preparatory for everything that follows is the fall of an elite group that has had control of the world for hundreds of years, and they're called by any number of names. Some people will recognize them as the military-industrial complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower spoke about. John F. Kennedy called them secret societies. They've been called the secret state, the shadow government, the Illuminati, the New World Order. And these are people above and beyond necessarily our governments around the world, or definitely
they're people we've got no idea who they are?
Well, the real leaders of this clique, we have no real idea of who they are. No, they very much exist in the shadows. But that whole movement towards domination of the world and reduction of the population, very significant reduction of the population, which was aimed at bringing in a nuclear World War III and various other situations like pandemics, chemtrails, weather warfare. You can see why it'd be difficult to cover all this in 10 minutes.
But how do we know about all this stuff? Like, how do you know about this stuff?
Well, it's talked about quite freely on the internet, but most people don't put any credence in it.
Because do you think that's just because it's internet conspiracy, or?
Well, I think it's because this particular clique that Eisenhower and Kennedy talked about has control of the mainstream media, most of the mainstream media. And assassinates its opponents, as Kennedy said they do. And we could go over numerous people, including Kennedy himself, who've been taken out by this cabal. But what I want to tell your listeners, though, is that it is falling. I don't know if you're aware of the deep underground military bunkers below Virginia and Colorado that were blown up recently. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that at all. In fact, I wouldn't have read that anywhere, would I?
Well, not in the mainstream media, I'm afraid, no, in the alternative press. But there are a large number of underground military bunkers around the world. There's one in Australia under Pine Gap. And these were the centers of this network of elitists. Two of them were taken out recently. I think it was August 19. They were talked about in the media as being two earthquakes, but in fact they weren't. They were the explosion of two of these bunkers. And that, more than anything else, says a lot about what's happening with this worldwide elite. It is falling. It's coming down. And, of course, it's being opposed by the population in the Occupy Together movements and Arab Spring.
But is that just about people coming out against what's happening economically around the world, or are you saying that it's deeper?
Oh, much deeper, much deeper.
In what ways there?
Well, unfortunately, in 10 minutes it wouldn't be very easy to talk about it, but the effort, the total program of this New World Order, as they called themselves at one point, was for the domination of the world. This small elite, what Occupy Together calls the 1%, planned on starting a nuclear third world war by dropping an atomic bomb on Iran, and they were stopped 3 times in that effort. They've been stopped. Enough people have said no to this. And a prominent example would be the American Navy has pulled out of its one-time membership in this cabal and has stopped, I'd say, 2 efforts to bomb Iran. And so this cabal is being defeated. And when it is defeated, when when this act of clearing or deconstructing this secret state, this shadow government, is complete, then the events will start that are so revolutionary. And I think this is what your listeners really need to hear about.
Now, just going back there, you said you didn't want to put dates, though, and we talked about October 28th being the end of the Mayan calendar, the alleged end of the world. But, like, I've heard that dates like the 11th of the 11th of this year, being 11/11/11, are a critical date in what will be the future of the world.
That's true. Well, the real critical date is December 21st, 2012. But there will be...
Because
there'll be a shift in consciousness at that time. There'll be an actual transformation occurring around the world, and this is being discussed quite commonly on the internet, but not many people know about it. It will be preceded by a new financial system for the world. Some people call this the abundance program. Some people call it, for instance, Zeitgeist calls it the wisdom economy. But most people know it as by its initials, which spell the word NISARA, which means the National Economic Stabilization and Recovery Act, which is in its particularity an act of the American Congress. But it describes a system that's going to restore abundance to the planet. Very few people know about this.
But when you say this, though, is this abundance of money based on the fact that the financial world is crumbling, or?
Well, the financial world is crumbling because it's being brought down. The corrupt economic system and financial system, which has been responsible for so much misery in the world, is being taken apart. And once it's taken...
When you say being taken apart, though, how is it being taken apart, or by whom? Because if you're saying, I mean, obviously it's a structure that's been in place for over 100 years.
Yes.
And we've all been told we need to go to work, we need to earn money, we have to do this, we have to pay our bills. So what I'm wondering is, when you say brought down, how does that occur?
Well, if I'm going to do a decent job of telling you about that, I'm going to have to introduce other players into the equation, because I really can't talk about it without introducing those players. And introducing them is going to test your listeners' patience.
Okay, which one's fine.
All right. They may think that I'm completely off the wall, but I assure you I'm not off the wall. The other players are human beings.
Well, you've actually said, though, that man did not descend from the ape.
No, they didn't descend from the ape.
Okay, so where did we come from?
Sorry?
So where did we come from, and how does that change our future or whatever?
Well, that's probably a good way of leading into the subject. We actually have been implanted on Earth, you could say, introduced to the Earth from other star systems. We came from star systems such as the Pleiades, such as Andromeda, such as Arcturus, Sirius. Now again, people don't know about this. It's talked about quite a bit on the internet, but most people have never heard what I'm about to say. But this being the end of the cycle, our star family, if you like to call it that, has journeyed here to assist us to pull out from underneath the thumb of the cabal. And they are the ones who are bringing down the cabal. It's really them that saved this planet. Have you ever heard of the Hastings panel?
No, I haven't, but what you're talking about sounds a little bit almost like the Star Wars movies, and I don't mean that in any disrespect.
Well, the Star Wars movies are ways of kind of preparing the public for the dramatic disclosure that's going to come in the next 3 months, in which we'll be introduced to these galactic races. All human beings, by the way, they are like us human beings. They're not green men or blobs or reptiles or any of that kind of thing. They're human beings just like us, and they are the star nations that we descended from. So no, we didn't descend from the apes. No, we were brought here. We are the seed that we are was introduced from other planets.
But that what you're saying, though, is almost contrary to everything we've been told.
Oh, yes, indeed.
And you mentioned before, I hope people don't think I'm crazy, but you're a member of Mensa. So how do you come to this, not necessarily conclusion, but how do you come to knowing that this information is correct or that this is what's going to happen?
Sure.
Did this happen when you had that moment of enlightenment?
No, and actually that moment of enlightenment wasn't in the out-of-body experience, but in a spiritual experience I had about 10 years later. No, it didn't come then. It comes from reading literature, which is posted on the internet, channeled literature, so literature received by telepaths and clairaudient individuals from these galactic human beings who are presently around the Earth in spaceships which are cloaked from view. If you go to YouTube, you'll see hundreds of reports of UFOs. They increase every year, and they're increasing every year because they're trying to say to us, look, you need to get prepared because we're about to announce our presence. And when we do, it's going to change the paradigm on Earth like you've never seen. And it will. They are the ones that are bringing this abundance program in. They are the ones that have supplied the gold from other planets that backs up the currency. They're the ones that are going to be bringing technology to us which will make everything we have obsolete. They're also the ones that are going to be preparing us for what in enlightenment circles would be known as unitive consciousness rather than dualistic consciousness. So this is that
takes us back to the Mayan calendar there too, because the Mayan calendar said that this final wave or whatever they term it, which started in March this year and finishes this week, that is the unity or the universal conscious wave. Is that correct?
Yes, and in fact, see, the only difficulty would be, Stephen, if we consider that the Mayan calendar ends on October 28th, and all of this is then going to happen on October 28th. No, the Mayan calendar does end on October 28th, I presume. I'm not an expert, but that's just the start of the next era, the New Age, the Aquarian Age, or what Hindus call the Sat Yuga. That's just the start of it. And in this new age that's starting, all these events are going to be happening. It's correct to say that the galactics have come here in coordination with the end of the Mayan calendar. That's correct. But it's not correct to think that all of this is going to happen on one day. Is that clear? Did I say that clearly?
Absolutely. And look, just going back to the Mayans, so I've read that there is a documentary coming out at some point quite soon where it says that the Mayans were completely aware of the galactics, as you call them, and in fact had contact with them, which is possibly why they just disappeared from the Earth in one go.
Well, some of them did. Some of them undoubtedly went back to the star nations that they came from. There are many, many sources for this information. It's contained in numerous places. For example, I read channeled writings from the 1870s that talk about it. There were masters like Bain Seduno in 1914 to 1940 who talked about it. A spirit guide named Silver Birch talked about it. The Mayans talk about it. I think the Tibetans talk about it. It's well known to various esoteric traditions. It's only the mass of people at large who don't know about it.
So as a member of Mensa, though, how do you explain to people that what you believe or what you're saying today, and each time you have said it's on the internet, which some people will go, oh, well, it's on the internet, it can't be true. How do you explain to people that this is possibly what's going to happen?
Well, it is a bit difficult. I mean, all of this that I'm talking about is enough to cause people to for their jaw to drop, and I realize that, and that's a difficulty that we have. I think, though, that once disclosure happens, that's the way that people talk about it.
Disclosure being
the announcement by the governments of the world that extraterrestrials exist, that they're here, that they've been here for quite some time now. See, the CIA and the American government have covered this up for years.
But it can't possibly just be the CIA and the American government. There are governments and security forces all over the world.
Well, if any government around the world stepped out of line and began to talk about these things, those government ministers who did talk about would be killed. Do you remember James Forrestal, the Secretary of Defense?
I don't personally, no, sorry.
I can't remember if he was I think he must have been in Eisenhower's regime, but I can't remember that exactly. But he was thrown out of a hospital window because he wanted to announce that the extraterrestrials were here. And when he reached the ground, he was still alive, and he was shot and killed on the ground so that this would be kept a secret. And I think you probably know yourself that if you view anything on UFOs from 10, 15 years ago, you'll see everybody laughing and ridiculing and making it seem as if the person who's talking about it is crazy. And this was a mandated policy from the CIA, which is now lifting. I mean, you now see Nick Pope of the Ministry of Defense in Britain saying, oh no, it's true, it's definitely true, they're here, they've been here for quite a while, and I, Nick Pope, participated in ridiculing it because that's what we needed to do back then. But the Brazilian military are freely reporting UFOs now. China is giving publicity to the UFOs over China. A lot of reports are coming out from the United States, from Russia. And I don't know if you ever saw the video of the UFO above the Temple of the Rock in Jerusalem.
I did, actually, because that was on the news.
Yeah, very dramatic. And it was meant to be dramatic. These are all meant to be dramatic because what they're saying is we're here, and within 3 months from now, we're going to be announcing ourselves. And once we do, we're joining with you to create, I'd say paradise on earth, really.
Okay, so whilst the Mayan calendar may be ending next week, you're saying that the year ahead is going to be full of lots and lots of things, not necessarily the end of the world at all, but a whole new world.
Well, I don't know who said that the Mayan calendar signaled the end of the world. Certainly not the Mayans. They've never said that.
No, but that's been that's been something that's been in I suppose commonplace discussions, mainstream media. I mean, in Australia right now we have an ad for a deodorant that's called something 2012 Happy End of the World.
But that's what I'm trying to get across to you and your listeners, Stephen, is that's an engineered kind of thing. That is the various handmaidens of the cabal trying to make the populace afraid. But there is nothing to be afraid of. And the handmaidens of the cabal, if I can call them that, are going to be revealed for what they're trying to do, which is to stampede the population and keep them ignorant of what's really happening in the world. Do you remember when George Bush came on TV after 9/11, which, by the way, was an engineered operation, as was the London bombings and the Madrid bombings and the Oklahoma City bombings and the Madras assault? They were all designed to make us afraid. And he came on, he said, don't listen to any conspiracy theorists. Don't believe them. And everybody adopted that viewpoint. Oh, yeah, that's a conspiracy theory. I'm not going to believe it. But really, the 9/11 tale is the conspiracy theory. The theory that 19 hijackers blew up the World Trade Center. 6 of those 19 hijackers were found alive after 9/11. And Osama bin Laden himself on September 10th, 9/11, September 10th, 2001, was lying in a Rawalpindi hospital on dialysis. So he couldn't have been in an Afghani cave reporting this. We have been so thoroughly hoodwinked, the purpose of all of which is to keep us dumbed down and not aware of what's really happening in the world. But that's about to be blown wide open, because as soon as the galactics show themselves and say, we're here, and we've been here since 1945, since you exploded the first atomic bomb, and we're going to help you build a new world.
And that new world obviously includes an amazing new sense of technology and everything else.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, see, there again, I mean, just think about it. We have had pre-energy devices for, since the 50s. I used to work for Hughes Aircraft. And one day an engineer came up to me and he said, Steve, did you know that the computer came from the Roswell spacecraft? And I said to him, his name is Vic, and I said, "Oh, come on, Vic, don't give me that kind of crap." And he said, "Well, go speak to Al Bedard, who was the project manager, and ask him." And I went over and I asked Al, was the computer gotten from the Roswell spacecraft? And he said, yes. And Hughes Aircraft back engineered it. Now, this is now well known that the computer came from the Roswell spacecraft. So did Kevlar, so did Teflon, so did fiber optics. It wasn't a weather balloon, it was a spacecraft. And so not only did they get these kinds of inventions from the Roswell spacecraft, but when they cooperated with the little grays, the Zeta Reticulans, when the American government cooperated, they got free energy devices, anti-gravity vehicles, and all kinds of other things which they've held back from us. Nobody knows that that the Americans have spacecraft. Nobody knows that the Americans have been going to Mars since 1970, 71 perhaps, that they've had timed transportation since the late 1960s, that they've had teleportation devices, what they call jump rooms, from the late 1960s. Nobody knows about any of this. But these free energy devices are going to be made available to us, and we won't need gasoline or oil, or won't even need electricity. It's all going to be different.
Well, Steve, it's been fantastic talking to you, and obviously the end of the Mayan calendar doesn't mean necessarily next week that a world is ending. It's simply a new era, if I'm taking what you're saying as being correct.
Absolutely, Stephen. Thanks. It's been a pleasure
Steve,
talking
thanks so much.
Thank you.
And, of course, Steve Beckow, you can read all about what he's been talking about today at Steve Beckow, that's BECKOW.com.
Thank you.